We are learning Parshas Beshallach today. So last week's Parsha we learned how the last three plagues were performed. We learned how Paro sent the Jewish people out of Egypt. And here we are going out of Egypt, ready to go to Eretz Israel. Simply that the plan, in quotes, was we're going to go out of Egypt, go to Mount Sinai, get the Torah, get the Ten Commandments, Hashem's presence, and go to Eretz Israel. Simple as that. Unfortunately, things changed. And various things happened along the way, which I want to come back to, please God, at the end. But let's just go through some of the things that happened in the Parsha. The main theme of the Parsha is the splitting of the Red Sea and the Shira that was sung after we went through Yam Suf. Now we call it the Red Sea, Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds. Whichever we want to call it, essentially we all know where the Red Sea is, and that's kind of where they went through at some point there. And there is a question, did they actually go all the way through? According to many opinions, they just did a half circle and came back to the same shore where they started. Either way, it doesn't matter. The Jewish people left Egypt, and the Parsha starts, Vayhi Beshallach Paro, it was when Paro sent us out. Es Ha'amet sent the people out. V'lo nacham Elokim derech Eretz Pelishtim, ki karovhu, ki amar Elokim, pen yinachem ha'am b'roisam, milchama v'yishavu mitzrayma. When Paro sent the Jewish people out, Hashem led them on this very circuitous journey by the way of the Philistines, with the Pelishtim, because it was near, because Hashem said, maybe the people will reconsider. So they went that way. But, did not lead them that way. I'll come back to that. Because he says the people might see a war there, the Pelishtim might attack them, and then they're going to want to return to Egypt. So Hashem took us on this roundabout kind of route. A number of reasons are given why he took us on that route. The Torah says straight away that there'll be a war, but also some people from the tribe of Ephraim had tried to leave Egypt 30 years before that. They calculated, we know that we were going to be under control of other people for 400 years. From the time of Avram was told at the Bris Bein HaMesarim that your children will be under control of other people, strangers in a foreign land for 400 years. They calculated that 400 years started from the Bris Bein HaMesarim, which was 30 years before Yitzchak was born. And so they said, that was when it was put in place. 400 years later, we're leaving. And they left, and they were attacked by the Pelishtim, and they were killed. So that Hashem didn't want the people to go that way, because they might see the bodies that were still lying in the desert, the bones in the desert, and then want to run back to Egypt because the Pelishtim might attack them. Another reason was, as the Torah says, that Pelishtim might wage war against us. The third reason brought down is that there was a covenant that was entered into by Avraham and Yitzchak that for 3 generations we won't attack each other. They didn't uphold it with the Bnei Ephraim, but the grandchildren of those Pelishtim were still alive, and therefore we didn't want to engage in war with them. We were quite happy to go away from them. Pelishtim were people who, let's talk a little bit of politics right now. Pelishtim, the Philistines as they were known, were people who had invaded that part of the land around Gaza from Crete. They were of Greek origin. They invaded the Pelishtim. When the Romans came to Eretz Israel and they took over and destroyed the temple, they renamed that land Palestina. That became the name the Romans called it after the Pelishtim. Come along the British 1800 years later, and they recreated this name Palestine in English. That's where it all comes from. Those people who call themselves Palestinians have got nothing to do with the Pelishtim. Most of them were brought into the land of Israel in the Ottoman Empire. When the Jews started coming back, Jews had always lived in the land of Eretz Israel. When the Jews started coming back to Israel, the Ottomans, the Turks, said, well, hang on, we can't have more Jews in the land than we've got Muslims. And they imported people from across their empire, many of whom were from North Africa, from Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, etc., had zero connection to the land of Israel, but they became the Palestinian people. So when we talk about right of return, there is only one people that has a right of return. That is the Jewish people. Hashem promised that land to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. All three of them. He made separate promises, continued to pass it down one to the next. The Arab nation is descended from Abraham through Yishmael, but the Torah is very, very clear that Yishmael was not given the brachas, and Yitzchak was from Abraham, and that Hashem then told Yitzchak that his children will become the owners of the land of Canaan, as it was known at that time. It will be our land forever. Similarly, when Yitzchak had two sons, Yaakov and Esav, Yaakov was given the brachas, as we learned a few weeks ago, and then Hashem blessed Yaakov when he went down to Egypt, saying his children will inherit the land of Canaan, which became Eretz Israel, which is Yaakov's name. So there is no evidence whatsoever in the Torah that anybody but the Jewish people have rights in the land of Israel. Other people want to live there with pleasure, live under Jewish law, and you're fine. And so therefore, from a purely political perspective in modern terms, we need to trace back to the origin and the source. And the source is in the Torah. Quite simply, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov were promised the land for their children, no one else's children. And it needs to be through Yaakov and the 12 tribes that the land is ours. And there have always been Jewish people in the land. There's not always been other people. Most of the time, unfortunately, we've been under the domain of other nations. And it's now time where we get under the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Hashem, and that He shows the world that it is ours. And so we've been pushed from pillar to post for at least 2,000 years since the Roman invasion, but before that as well. And it's now time that Hashem shows us the light and shows the world the light of what the land of Israel really is. So the people turned backwards. Hashem turned everybody backwards, back towards Egypt. They were walking around in circles. Paro had led the Jewish people out of Egypt. He was quite happy for us to go. He was like, okay, it's enough. The Jewish people have proven to him, or Hashem has proven that He's in control. We need to let them go. They're gone, and suddenly there's this panic of those Egyptians that are left. Now, we need to remember that we said last week there was 600,000. It says, Torah says approximately 600,000 men left Egypt, plus all their families, plus a group of people that converted as they were leaving, many Egyptians and many others known as the Erev Rav, this mixed multitude of nations that came with us. Many of the Egyptians who were quite wealthy joined the party because it's time to join the Jews. Hashem said to Moshe, you want to take them out, they are your people. And almost every incident we had in the desert, where we complained to Hashem 10 times, which we'll go through later on, was led by the Erev Rav. It was exclusively the Erev Rav. It was not, there were the odd people, Dasan and Aviram particularly, and others, Korach, but the complainers were generally those people that attached themselves to us, which is, the Torah doesn't necessarily, in the wording of the Torah, it doesn't seem to always come out, but you need to just look a little bit behind the scenes what Chazal says, and it often says that your people are doing this. Hashem telling Moshe that it's his people, those he brought out with him. Okay, so the Jewish people then are moving. The Torah tells us Hashem turned them the way of the wilderness towards the Sea of Reeds. The Torah tells us that, I'll just read the words here. V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. They were, the Art Scroll translates, they were armed. This word chamushim, they were armed. They carried arms with them. They were, they held up their sticks up high, ready to go. The word chamushim sounds very much like the word chamesh, 5. And what we learned last week, how 4/5 of the Jewish people did not go out of Egypt and died in the plague of darkness. This is the source of it. That word tells us that 4/5 of the Jewish people stayed and 1/5 comes out. And the commentaries all discuss that this 4/5 of the nation did not go out. I just see it's brought here. Rashi brings it, but it's brought here based on a medrash that the word derives from chomesh, a fifth, which implies only 1/5 of the Jews left Egypt. The rest were not prepared to adopt a new life as God's people. They died during the plague of darkness, so Egyptians would not see that the Jews as well as Egyptians were losing their lives. So that we discussed last week, but this is the source for it. They journeyed from Sukkot, which was the end of last week's Parsha. They came to a place called Etam, at the edge of the wilderness. Hashem went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them by the way, and at night they had a pillar of light. So we learn out that the Jewish people were enveloped by 7 clouds. And these are not clouds as cumulus clouds in the sky. These were what we call clouds of glory. They were Hashem's presence enveloping the Jewish people. They had clouds on all 4 sides to protect them from anybody else. They had a cloud below to smooth out the ground, to protect them from snakes and scorpions and other beasts, flatten the ground so they walk over mountains they had no idea. They were walking on Nikes on an airbed. It was just a straight, simple walk. And they had a cloud above them, which had protected them from the heat, and in the desert there wasn't much rain, but protect them from the elements. And then this cloud that the Torah talks about in front of them to lead them by day, so they could see Hashem's presence leading them, and at night by a pillar of fire. That's how the Jews traveled day and night. And it says Hashem did not remove the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night from the people. Now, along comes Paro and all his people, and they are somewhat now upset. They've just lost millions of slaves. They've just lost the most incredible advisors that they could imagine. Anytime they asked anything of Hashem, of Paro, he would consult with some of the Jewish wise people, the tribe of Levi particularly, and they would advise him as to what the best solutions were. Paro's economy was the greatest economy in the world, and over the last 12 months it had been decimated. And yet the Egyptians were, hang on, we've lost this workforce, we've lost these advisors, we need to go and get them back. And they suddenly had a change of heart. Now it's brought down, Hashem hardened Paro's heart several times in last week's Parsha, and Hashem helped Paro change his mind. And off Paro now gathers. Now we've got to remember, Egypt was decimated. There were no animals left in Egypt because the hail had wiped out, and the plague of pestilence had wiped out most of the animals. But in the plague of hail, and it's brought quite clearly there in the words of the Torah, anybody who moved his animal inside because he was fearful, he had fear of Hashem, he had Yiras Hashem, so his Egyptian moved their animal inside, those animals were not touched. And Paro was able to get 600 horses, and they grabbed their chariots and they attached them to these horses. And Paro said, normally a king rides at the back of the army. He's not going to be there. But I need to go and defeat this Hashem. And so I'm going to ride in the front. And Paro led his troops out into battle to attack the Jewish people. And so he harnessed his chariot, took 600 of his elite chariots and all the other chariots in Egypt with officers on all of them, and they chased the Jewish people. Hashem, again it says, Hashem hardened Paro's heart. The Egyptians pursued the Jewish people and overtook them because you got 600 chariots chasing after millions of people who are walking with donkeys and children and elderly, and it was much, much harder. And basically what happened is the Jewish people are now trapped on pretty much on all 4 sides. They've got the sea, they've got Paro, they've got mountains on the one side, they've got Baal-Zephon, one of the gods of Egypt, on another side, blocking them all around. And what are they going to do? And Hashem says, don't worry, we'll let you through. You're going to go out through a miracle. But people complain. And they're complaining, it's all over. And so Moshe starts to daven. Hashem says, don't worry, don't fear, just do what you need to do. And Moshe starts davening and davening. And Hashem says, not a time to daven now. Now's a time for action. Lift up your staff again and let's see what happens. And the Midrash brings down that Nachshon ben Aminadav, the leader of the tribe of Yehuda, walked into the sea. They knew the sea was going to split, and he walked and he walked and he walked, and the water was coming higher and higher till it basically got to his nose and the sea split. and the sea split, and the Jewish people walked into the sea. And there were many, many miracles that happened. 10 of them are brought down. We know in the Pesach Seder that we have the calculations of if there were 10 trials or 10 plagues in Egypt, there were 250 or 50 or 200 or 250, all part of the Haggadah at Yam Suf. It was 10 major plagues. This number 10 keeps flowing through from creation, through the 10 trials of Abraham, through the 10 plagues, through the 10 plagues, we can call it, that happened to the Egyptians in the sea, through the 10 times we tested Hashem in the desert, through getting the 10 commandments. It's this number 10, because 10 is about completeness. It's about being able to change and move on and get to another level. And so what happened at Yam Suf was the water split. I'm just reading from the Midrash says at the moment. The water split, and it's brought in the Midrash in Mechilta. It was just easier to read it from here because it's nice and concise in English. They were protected. There was a roof-like protection. They were going through like a tunnel, like a dome. This split was in 12 individual passages. Each tribe had their own pathway. The ground below them was completely dry. They were walking on dry land. So you can imagine when the waves come in and go out, it's mud underneath us. There's no dry land, but this dried instantaneously. They walk on completely dry land. When the Egyptians came in, it changed instantaneously to clay, that their feet got trapped and their chariots got trapped in the surface of the sea. And all of this is midah keneged midah, measure for measure, because the Egyptians had made the Jews work with and punish the Jews by building with clay. They needed to be caught in clay. Every single one of the plagues, and we didn't discuss this, but each of the plagues was done measure for measure. For something the Egyptians did to a Jewish person, they were punished measure for measure. And similarly in our lives, everything we do right, every mitzvah we do, Hashem gives us something, a reward, measure for measure, depending on how we do it, etc. But we get rewarded for what we do. Similarly, there is a punishment if we do things wrong, measure for measure. Everything in this world has to be in balance. The water became like a rock, hurling itself down onto the Egyptians as they came in. So the Egyptians pursued the Jews. They were right behind us. And so many, many pictorial Haggadahs show this, but the Jewish people walking through and the waves crashing down behind us like rocks on the Egyptians. The Jewish people could see each other through the walls. They were completely transparent. They were glass-like walls. So we could see, our tribe's walking here. Next to us is another tribe. We can see them. We can wave to them. Next to them is another tribe. Now, what happens if a Jew became thirsty? They just put their glass or hand into the wall, and today put their Frank Green water bottle into the wall. They were all given their most expensive water bottles, I think. They're brilliant, but I don't own one. I'm too cheap to buy. I think it's like $80 water bottle.
It's a sack.
Yes. They put their sack, into the wall, and it filled with water. It just became the most beautiful drinking water. Now we're talking about seawater. Sparkling water was best salts you can get, soda water, whatever. And they drank it. And then they took their hand out, their bottle out, and the walls became like glass again. And so this incredible miracle happened. We come out to the other side, or on the same side, wherever it was, and the Jewish people are now, they've seen Hashem's hand. They've seen a miracle beyond miracles. And yet, they're still concerned. They're concerned that they saw the Egyptians coming in after them. They knew they were right there. Maybe the Egyptians got through as well. Maybe they didn't. Those Egyptians that were pursuing us had tormented us for decades. They're coming back to torment us again. And so Hashem spewed their bodies out onto the seashore. And every single one of them died. Except, according to some opinions, Paro didn't die. And Paro became the king of Nineveh. The story of Jonah and the big fish as opposed to whale, which we did discuss around Yom Kippur time. Jonah, it's brought down that with the same Paro not, but Paro had learned his lesson and now he was able to do tshuva in Nineveh. So it's a lovely little connection. But it is brought down that no Egyptian survived and they were all washed up on shore. Those chariots that they had were covered in precious jewels and they the Jewish people were able to grab the precious jewels and again become richer from the Egyptians. They had taken out gold and silver and garments, as we learned last week. The Egyptians had lent it to us. We're taking all this out, and now again we're getting further riches from Egypt. The Egyptians themselves were punished with 10 plagues, I guess we could call them, as they went through the sea. Even though it was morning, it was daytime, it was darkness for them. They could not see where they were going. The clouds caused the ground under their feet to become soft as clay, as we said. The pillar of fire that illuminated the way for the Bnei Israel was an intense fire, heat for the Egyptians. It was extremely hot, caused the horses to stumble from the heat just on the ground. It burnt the wheels of their chariots so much that their chariots caught fire. Since the horses' hooves had fallen off because, unfortunately, they were punished as well, but because of that, they stumbled, fell over, and the Egyptians inside there were turned around in the crushing waters. When the water came gushing towards the Egyptian, nobody was able to get out. So they were closed in this water completely. Hashem shook the Egyptians like someone who turns a pot upside down. They were tumbled in the sea. I have this picture of those people who go in a barrel over Niagara Falls. That's what it would have been like, just tumbling over and over and over. Some of them were covered in earth at the bottom of the sea. All of this is measure for measure for what they had done. Some sank as fast as lead. Others were like feathers because they just drifted around and their last breath was taken. The Jewish people saw them dying. They were washed on shore alive. Jewish people saw them dying. Every bit of it was measure for measure. And finally the sea pushed them all out so the Jewish people could see them. The question is, in what merit did the Jewish people have that the sea should split for them and not for the Egyptians? And there was a whole discussion in heaven between the angels, because the angels come along to Hashem and said, hang on, the sea's got a natural course. You can't cause the sea just to split. The Jewish people, even though they connected to Judaism, even though they stayed Jewish by keeping their same names in Egypt, they wore Jewish clothes, they spoke Lashon HaKodesh, they still, many of them became idol worshippers in Egypt. So the angels are saying, well, Haim Avodah Zarah, Haim Avodah Zarah. These Avodah Zarah, these are idol worshippers, the Jews. These are idol worshippers, the Egyptians. What are you splitting for them? And the Torah brings down, just right near the beginning, that Vayikach Moshe etz asmas Yosef imoy ki hashpeya hishpia es b'nei Yisrael le'mo poked yifkad Elokim eschem v'halisem es atzmoisai mize eschem. The children of Israel, as we said, were armed. Moshe took the bones of Yosef up with him because Yosef had firmly told the Jewish people this secret sign. How will you know that the person who's going to redeem you is this person? There was a secret sign that 2 words, pakod yifkod, that I will surely bring you out. And once they knew that somebody had said these words, Moshe had said it, they would be taken out of Egypt. And because Yosef, the trials that he had gone through with Potiphar's wife, with being in jail, and all of those signs, he never faltered from his belief in Hashem. Because of that, and because Moshe went and found the bones of Yosef, the sea split. Only because of that. No other reason did the sea split. And so this tumult going on in heaven, and the other reason was because Nachshon ben Aminadav was prepared to go into the water and prepared to get, effectively put his life extremely on the line. A huge chance. Well, he had emunah. He had the emunah that he knew Hashem would open the waters. And so the bones of Yosef, Moshe, when Yosef died, it's brought down in the end of Parshas Vayechi, Yosef died and the Egyptians put him in a coffin. They put him in a lead coffin and they put him in the bottom of the sea, bottom of the river, in the Nile River. Now Moshe, while the Jewish people were going around asking for gold and silver and garments from the Egyptians, Moshe was running around trying to find Yosef's bones to take with him. And he did, and he was able to, through Kabbalistic ways, get this coffin to rise up. And the coffin rose up, and he was able to carry this coffin with him out. All 12 of the Shvatim were taken out. Their bones were all taken out. But purely because of what Yosef and who he was, the sea split. And so we get to the sea splitting, and the Jewish people are now saved, and they get to the other side, and they see the Torah brings, on that day Hashem saved Klal Yisrael from the hand of the Egyptians. The Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. They saw Hashem's great hand, that what he had inflicted upon Egypt, and the people revered Hashem. And this is it's an interesting question to ask at Seder night. Where in the Haggadah is Moshe's name mentioned? It's only mentioned once, and it's in passing. It's this verse here. V'yar Yisrael es hayad hagadola asher asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim, v'yiru ha'am es Hashem, v'yaminu b'Hashem v'Moshe avdoi. So, Jewish people, Israel saw the great hand that Hashem had inflicted upon Egypt, and the people revered Hashem, and they had faith in Hashem and in Moshe, his servant. Because if we go to the Seder and we start saying, oh, it was all Moshe that did this, it was all Moshe, we might elevate Moshe to be a deity. Moshe was the greatest prophet that ever lived. No prophet ever came close to Moshe or ever will come as close to Hashem as Moshe. And we need to know that, and that's one of the 13 principles of faith. But Moshe was only Hashem's servant. He was Eved Hashem. And so the people had faith in Moshe, in Hashem, and in Moshe, his servant. So there's something to remember for Seder night. Great question to ask anybody at the table, because most people don't really know this. That's the only mention of Moshe's name in the Haggadah. The Haggadah, the Baal Haggadah, the author of the Haggadah, left Moshe out completely, so that we realize that everything is in the hand of Hashem, not through Moshe. And then we get to the next Parsha in the Sefer Torah, and that's the famous song, one of 10 songs in Tanakh. Az Yasher Moshe U'Bnei Yisrael Es Hashira Hazois LaHashem V'Yomri Le'mor. Then Moshe and the children of Israel chose to sing this song to Hashem, and they said the following, and they went through the song, and the song is written whenever there's a song in the Torah, it's written in the Sefer Torah in a different way, and this is written like brickwork. So you'll have a few words, and then a gap, then a few words and a gap, and then the next line has got words in the middle. So it looks exactly like the way we lay bricks normally, is the way the Shira is written in the Sefer Torah. So this is, according to many opinions, not everybody holds this, but this is one of those times where you get to this in the laning, and the Gabba will stand at the bima and give a clap, and everybody will stand up because of the miracles. It's here. And when we read the Aseret HaDibros in next week's Parsha, a few times in the year, we stand up specifically. Now, some people say we shouldn't stand up because one thing in the Torah is not more important than others. So some shuls don't stand up. Most of the shuls that I've ever been to do, they say, well, if we stand up, then it's saying one is more important than the other, whereas others say, no, this is showing Hashem's open miracles of Yam Suf, and the song that we said at the time, therefore we stand up for it. Some people stand up all the time. The lesson from this is, if the shul stands up and it's your custom not to stand up, you should still stand up. Because we don't do something different to where we are in that shul. Now, if the shul's custom is to stay seated, you probably shouldn't stand. However, there are many people who stand throughout laning. I try and stand wherever the Torah is read. And so then it's not a problem to stand then, because I'm standing 5 minutes before and 20 minutes after through the laning. And so it's, if you can, if we're able to, it's a good thing to stand through Kriyas HaTorah. So I don't want to go through, as far as I recall last year, we did go through the song, but just a few points out of the song. The song is sung by Moshe and the Jewish people and the men, we'll come back to that in a moment, to Hashem. One of the most well-known verses in the whole Shira is Zeh Keli V'Anvehu. This is my God. I will glorify him. I will magnify him. Whenever we see the word Zeh or Zois or Zoit, any word like this, it means we can point. And so they could point to Hashem because they were able to see Hashem's divine presence, his Shekhinah. And so it's brought down that even the way it's brought down by Chazal, even a maidservant had a greater vision of Hashem whilst walking through the Yam Suf than the prophets had, who were able to see Hashem's chariot. It's brought down the later prophet Yeshai, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel. Yechezkel's vision of Hashem's chariot is as deep a vision that we have in Tanakh. It's one of those things that brought down. We don't teach people that, except a great rabbi will teach his students one-on-one about that. It's not something that's taught publicly. We read the Haftorah about it, but it's not something we teach the intricate details because it's deep, deep Kabbalistic things. But even a maidservant who's minimal education had a greater vision of Hashem at this point in time than these great prophets. And so it's hard to imagine. There were people who, it's brought down, were born in the fields in Egypt. Young boys, baby boys were born in the fields. They were subject to a death penalty because any baby boy was born was going to be killed. And so their mothers basically left them in the fields. And Hashem sort of took them down into a cavern under a rock. And he himself fed these babies until they grew up. And when they grew up, they were like, came out of the ground like grass, the Pasuk says. And they went back to their families. And these boys were now older men, were able to look up and say, now I can see how we were fed when we were little children. They could see Hashem. They had this vision of that was the Hashem who fed them when they were babies, who's now feeding them or taking them through the Yam Suf. So many people have accustomed to, when the Sefer Torah is lifted, we do Hagbah, to look at the Sefer Torah and point to, we point with a pinky, you don't want to be rude and point. Many people point with their pinky towards the Sefer Torah. It's a slightly custom. Most Ashkenazim didn't have that custom, but many, many people have kind of adopted that because it's wherever we see the word Zeh or Zois, and we raise the Sefer Torah, we say V'zois HaTorah, and this is the Torah that Hashem gave us. And so because we can see it and we can point at the word Zois, that's why many people do point to the Sefer Torah. The words of the Shira encapsulate pretty much everything that we have said so far. Some of the Egyptians died like lead. Some of them were like straw floating. It's all brought down in these words, and it's all recognizing Hashem's hand in everything that we do. But we need to move along because there's a lot more in the Parsha. This Shabbos is one of those Shabbosim that has got a special name. It's called Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song. And so the focus obviously is on the Shira. Now, I said before the men sang the song. This is where we learn halacha, that men and women should not sing together. Not ruling halacha here. Everyone must do what they need to do. But Miriam and the women, it says then, Miriam and the women, they took tambourines, which they'd taken out of Egypt, knowing that this was going to happen. And they played tambourines and they sang their song afterwards. They sang Shira as well, brought down that Miriam. And it's brought down here, Vatikach Miriam Hanavia, Miriam the prophetess. Brought straight there that she had prophecy. We knew about her prophecy from when she was a little child. But it's brought out down here that she was one of the actual prophets. They took a drum, she took it in her hand, and the women went after her with drums, and they were dancing, and they sang to Hashem. We now move away from Yam Suf, and we get to a place called Marah, and they ran out of water. They had nothing to drink, and the people complained to Moses, and Moshe, it's like, what am I going to do now? It's a bit of a problem. And so they had gone 3 days. And for 3 days they felt they didn't have water. And they come to this place and they complain. And why did they not have any water? Because Hashem had said, well, for the last 3 days, all you've been doing is traveling. I'm using my words now. I'm not saying this about Bnei Israel. They were schmoozing. They were sitting around and having a schmooze. As they were walking, they neglected Torah study. We are obligated to study every day, but every 3 days. And so because of this, the Chachamim instituted that we don't go 3 days without reading from the Torah, without learning Torah. And that's where it was instituted by Chazal, that we lane on Monday, Thursday, Shabbos. Moshe introduced Shabbos laning morning, but that's where we lane on Shabbos afternoon. So we start Shabbos afternoon, Monday and Thursday, we read, generally, almost all weeks, Rishon of the next week's Parsha. So Rishon is lain 4 times. Sometimes it's not Rishon, it's sometimes Rishon and a bit more, sometimes a bit less if it's a very long Parsha, but almost exclusively it's Rishon, except of course if it's Rosh Chodesh or Yom Tov or Chanukah or Purim on a Monday or Thursday, then we would lane the specific laning of that day. But generally we lane the next week's Parsha. And it's brought down because they didn't learn Torah for 3 days. And therefore their vessels were empty, they didn't have any supply of water. So there was some water there, but it was marrow, it was bitter water. So Hashem said to Moshe, take this bitter stick, throw it into the bitter waters, and he will give them clean drinking water. And so Moshe did that, and they had clean drinking water. And it was at this point in time that Hashem taught them 3 different new halachas. He gave the Jewish people, so we know that at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai, we got the Torah and everything else, but at this point in time, Hashem gave the Jewish people the mitzvahs of Shabbos, mitzvah of honoring one's parents, and all the civil law that was instituted in Parshas Mishpatim. It was brought down again in Mishpatim, but Hashem actually transmitted this to the Jewish people at this point in time. The reason why we have to have civil society, why we have to have courts, why all those things, which please God we'll learn about in 2 weeks' time, were actually given at this point in time, before the Torah was given. A month after they left Egypt on the 15th of Nisan, we get to the 15th of Iyar, and the little bit of dough that they had taken on their shoulders when they left Egypt had lasted for this entire month. For 30 days, 31 days, they had bread. And that was obviously miraculous, because how much bread can each person carry on their shoulders? It lasted for that point of time, and then it stopped. And the people complained, and they said, we need bread. And we need meat, because, it was pretty good in Egypt. We had lots of food in Egypt. We're hearing here now what the hostages were given to eat. That's probably what the Jewish people were able to eat in Egypt. Some of them were given 1 or 2 pitas a day, a little bit of rice maybe, a bit of nothing. Some in Egypt, a little bit of fish that they were able to find that Hashem was able to provide to them, but essentially they were given very little food. And now they're complaining that they need meat and bread. And so Hashem says, okay, tell the Jewish people they're going to get 2 things. They'll get quail that will fly in every night, and they're going to get man, what we call manna from heaven. And so every morning, 6 days a week, a wind will come along and blow away the dust. Rain will come and just clear out everything. And then there's going to be dew that will fall on the ground. And above the dew is going to be this special heavenly food called man. Above that will be another layer of dew. And each person should go out and collect as much man as they need for everyone in their family. And they collected. And the next day they did the same thing. And whatever man they collected the day before, there was that man for them. And they took essentially an omer each person, which is a measure of food to survive them for 2 meals a day. It's natural, normal to eat 2 meals a day. We eat 3, 4, 5, whatever. The natural way of life is 2 meals a day. And they had enough for breakfast and for dinner, whatever it was, and they were probably doing intermittent fasting. That's where we learn it from. And they had this man, and it's brought down that those people who were extremely righteous would just put their hand out their tent, and their man would be there. Those who were a little less righteous had to walk a bit, and those who were not so close to Hashem had to walk and walk and walk, potentially for miles to find their man. And so one day a righteous person looks out of his tent, and there's no man there. And so he starts walking and walking, and eventually sees his man way down in the distance. And then he suddenly realizes, I wasn't so good to the wife and kids last night. I was a little bit, angry with them, whatever the case might have been. Does tshuva, and the next day his man is outside his tent. And it was a way of realizing very quickly how we did wrong, how good we were not, each person for themselves. And they brought the man back. And it's brought down, the man tasted whatever they wanted to taste like. The man was miraculous food. They didn't have to cook it. They did cook it, some of them, because they weren't so trusting Hashem. But if the kid wanted to eat, chocolate mint ice cream for breakfast, that's what the kid was eating. But it had all the spiritual properties in it that every bit of that food was absorbed into their bodies. That they had no excrement. For the 40 years in the desert, there was no excrement. The food it's a spiritual food. And so the body took in what it needed, and that was the end of the food. There was nothing there. It was the most incredible miracle. Certain foods the man couldn't taste like, and later on when we complained again, the foods that we mentioned was those type of foods and that texture of food that they couldn't get. But at this stage, they got the man. And they were told, for 6 days, you'll get man. On the 6th day, on Erev Shabbos, you're going to get double man. You get 2 portions. Don't think you're going to get it. You're not allowed to leave over any man from today to tomorrow, except on Friday, where you leave half of it for Shabbos. Prepare that, make your chulent, make your Shabbos meal on Friday, and it'll be nice and warm for you on Shabbos morning, and no problem whatsoever. You're going to have food. But there were some people, and the way the Torah describes it is there were people who didn't listen. It happened on the 6th day, they gathered a double portion of food, 2 oimers for each, and all the princes of the assembly came and told Moshe, and Moshe said, this is what Hashem told me. Tomorrow is a rest day, it's Shabbos. Bake what you wish to bake, cook what you wish to cook. Whatever's left over, put away for yourself as a safekeeping until the morning. They put it away until morning as Moshe had commanded. It didn't stink, it didn't become any worm-like because some of them had tested Hashem during the week and they left over. And when they woke up in the morning, it was infested with worms. And it stunk because they were told, you've got to eat it all. So every time the people didn't listen, they just got this instant or overnight vision of, hang on, you're not listening to Hashem. Whatever they did, and they could see quite clearly what they're doing was right and wrong, and they got on the right path. So Moshe said, eat it today, tomorrow is Shabbos for Hashem. You're not going to find it in the field. 6 days gather, on the 7th day Shabbos, and this is a message for all time. It happened on the 7th day that some of the people went out to gather and they didn't find. So the Chazal bring down in the Midrash and the Gemara brings down Moshe's 2 adversaries who had been those people who had, when he had killed the Egyptian who were fighting the next day, who had basically run to Paro and told him that what Moshe had done, Dasan and Aviram. And here Dasan and Aviram thought, this is it, it's our time to get Moshe now. We've had enough of this guy. So they took some of their man from Friday and they went down, they sprinkled it across the desert. That will be there on Shabbos morning. But the birds came early in the morning before sunrise and they picked up all this man and they ate it. And so the Jewish people in that pasuk, some of the people went out that day, they couldn't find any man, the birds had eaten it. And so to this day we have a minhag of hakaras hatov, of being grateful to the birds. So many people on Friday afternoon go out and throw some breadcrumbs to the birds because we're thankful what those birds did 3,300 and something years ago. We're still thankful to the birds. So we're showing hakaras hatov to Hashem that He sent those birds even till today. And it's a beautiful minhag. When the kids were small, we used to go to the park and make a whole big deal of it and throw bird crumbs to the birds. We shouldn't do it. There are people, the minhag, the way some people bring it down is you do it on Shabbos, but we're not allowed to feed animals that are not our own. We're not allowed to feed wild animals on a Shabbos. And so therefore, we don't do it on Shabbos, but we do it before Shabbos so that the birds have time to come and eat it. If they come on only on Shabbos, that's fine, but as long as I did it on Erev Shabbos. And so here goes Dasan and Aviram testing Hashem through Moshe again and again and again. The same people. Hashem didn't want to take them out, and Moshe said, no, they'll do tshuva. And they were able, it seemed like they did, but they never quite got there. The man gives us incredible lessons till our time, because one of the things we learn from man is that we need to put in an effort. And we learn that those people who put in an effort could just get outside their tent because they were so reliant on Hashem. They knew Hashem was going to provide. But those who were not so reliant on Hashem, they know it's all me. I'm a self-made man. What's that? Self-made millionaire in the old days. Today it's a self-made billionaire. But they didn't trust so much in Hashem. So they went looking for the man. And Hashem said, right, it's out there. You'll find it. Go and work for it. Same thing, the lesson today. Hashem gives us man. Hashem gives us our allotment for the year. It's up to us. We have to put in an effort. How much effort we put in is up to us. And I can quite categorically say that I know that for many years we ate man. There's no question about it. Our salaries were not enough to pay the bills whatsoever, and yet we never faltered. And so it was, thank God, we relied on Hashem, and Hashem provides for us at all times. Does Hashem test us? Absolutely. Because that's the way we grow. By growing and understanding that Hashem's providing for us, it means, yes, we do need to put in an effort, but let's focus our effort in the right way. Let's not work ridiculous 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. If we go into a profession where that's the norm, choose a better profession. Simple as that. Now, we're all beyond choosing professions, but it's advice we can give to our children and grandchildren if they want it. So the people rested on the Shabbos. They got Shabbos. They come along to a place called Masa Umariva, and in the desert of Sinai, they're now getting close to getting to Sinai at this place, Rephidim, and there was no water again for the people. They were punished because they didn't listen to Hashem's warning, don't go out on Shabbos. So Hashem said, fine, we'll punish you with water. But they were really, really thirsty. And the weaker people were demanding that Moshe gives them water to drink. And they were grumbling. And there just was a lack of ease in the camp. And people were really not happy. Moshe cried out to Hashem and he said, I've got a problem, Hashem. What am I going to do? And Hashem said, don't slander the people. They're my children. This is happening for a reason. Take your stick. Go out and strike the rock. Take the elders with you and strike a rock. And Hashem performed a miracle, and out of this rock came water. And the water developed a river through the whole camp, and little streams and tributaries came off this, so that the people had fresh drinking water running through the camp at all times from the rock. And it's brought down, and we learn this out when Moshe, Miriam, and Aaron died. The three things that they were in their merit, because they led the Jewish people so wonderfully, we were given the water, the clouds of glory, and the man in the merit of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. And so because of that, we had these three things that protected us through our journeys for the next 40 years. These things protected us. When Miriam died, the water dried up. And Moshe then was told to go and speak to the rock. And we know Moshe hit the rock because he remembered this time he was commanded to hit the rock. 40 years later, he was commanded to speak to the rock. And Moshe thought, hang on, I can't find which rock. And he hit the rock. He was punished. He wasn't allowed to go into Eretz Israel because that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And so the people were now coming to Mount Sinai. They had the water. They had the man with the quail every day, and they had the clouds of glory. They were living in what we might call paradise. And they're getting close, but they had been weakened. The people had spoken out against Hashem. They had been weakened. And whenever we're in a weak state, Amalek attacks. Amalek being our cousin from Esav. And Amalek has this eternal hatred of the Jewish people. And Amalek attacked us. And Moshe sends Yehoshua out to go and wage battle against Amalek. Takes a few thousand soldiers and off they go and do battle. And Moshe stands up on a rock, on a hill, and he takes Aaron, his brother, and Hur with him, his nephew, the son of Miriam. Aaron being the Kohen Gadol, and Hur being from the tribe of Yehuda, who is going to be the kings of Egypt. King David HaMelech comes from Yehuda. Mashiach, please God, he should come soon, comes from Yehuda. And Moshe stood up on the top of the hill, and he raised his arms. And as the people looked up his arms, they davened to Hashem, and they were able to be winning the battle at all time, winning. But Moshe got tired, and his arms dropped. And as soon as his arms dropped, the tide turned in the battle, and Amalek was starting to gain ascendancy. So then Moshe decided he needs to raise his arms, but he couldn't. So Aaron and Hur stood next to him and lifted his arms up, and Moshe's arms were up. The people were essentially looking through Moshe's arms up to Shemaim, up to heaven, to Hashem, and davening, and we were able to prevail. And we were able to basically win the war. The Parsha ends, Vayam Hashem el Moshe Kasov Zois Zicharon B'Sefer B'Sim Ba'oznei Yeshua Ki Macha Emche Es Zecha Amalek Mitachas HaShemayim. Hashem says to Moshe, write this remembrance in the book, in other words, in the Torah, it's written here, and recite it to the ears of Yeshua, that I will surely erase the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. This is the reading that we do on Purim. The reading we do in Parshas Amalek the week before is from Sefer Devarim, where it says we've got a mitzvah to surely remember to wipe out Amalek. And Moshe built an altar there, and he called his name Hashem is my miracle, Shemo Hashem Nisi. For the hand is on the throne, and he said, for the hand is on the throne of Hashem. Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation. Hashem is battling Amalek every single generation. But unfortunately, Hashem is battling us many times, or we battling Hashem, I should say. Hashem is trying to bring us back all the time and make us come closer and closer. And we've discussed a number of the times we've tested Hashem in the desert. So I just want to go through, this is based on something that I saw from Rav David Rosenfeld on Torah.org, of the 10 trials that we gave Hashem through the desert. So lots of these trials come about in our Parsha. So let's just run through them. Some of them we have mentioned. It's brought down in a Gemara in Erchin on Daf 15a on Tesvav Amud Aleph, based on Pirkei Avos. In Pirkei Avos in chapter 5, there's a list of things starting with 10 different things that happened about creation, about Noach, about Abraham, about the 10 plagues, and about the 10 times we tested Hashem in the desert. So we were pinned against the Red Sea in this week's Parsha, with the Egyptians in close pursuit. We complained, you took us out to die in the desert, couldn't we have died in Egypt? This week's Parsha, that was the first complaint. We got through the Yam Suf, and we felt that the Egyptians had come out on the other bank until the water split for them, and we complained. We complained about the waters of Mara, as we said, after 3 days of not learning Torah. We complained about the food in the desert, where we were given the man eventually. We left over man in defiance of Hashem saying, don't leave over any at night at all, and we left it overnight. We went searching for the man on Shabbos morning that Dasan and Aviram had put out and that the birds had taken. All of those are in this week's Parsha. We complained at the waters of Rephidim in this week's Parsha as well. And that was where Moshe hit the rock, and we got the Be'er Shel Miriam, the well of Miriam. Then, in a few weeks' time, the golden calf. We complained and we brought the sin of the golden calf. After we had experienced Hashem's ultimate miracle of his presence being in front of us and giving us the Torah, we still complained, and 40 days later went to the golden calf. As we spoke about at the beginning, we spoke about the Erev Rav, this mixed multitude of nations who accompanied us, complained for meat. And this caused us to complain as well. That's brought down in the book of Bamidbar in Numbers. And then we sent the 10 spies into Eretz Yisrael, and they came back with a negative report. And Hashem said, you've tested me these 10 times, as our Mishnah brings down in Pirkei Avos. And so the amazing thing with all of this is many people say, there's lots of people who will say, if Hashem just showed me an open miracle, I would believe, I will do everything. And here our people are, the greatest of the great, the people Hashem gave the Sefer Torah to. He gave them the Torah on Mount Sinai. And 40 days later, we were bowing down to a golden calf. Now, when we get to the golden calf and discuss it in a few weeks' time, in Parshas Kisisa, we'll see that it wasn't all of the Jewish people. It was a very, very small number. But not many people got up and tried to prevent that happening. Very few did. And those very few did was Hur, who was killed. And so we need to know that Hashem is there testing us all the time. We shouldn't be testing Hashem. It's not our job. There's one way we can test Hashem, and there's only one way brought down where we can test Hashem. That's giving tzedakah. If we give Hashem a proper amount of tzedakah, it's brought down, we give 10%. But if we give Hashem proper tzedakah, that's the way we can test Hashem. Because by giving, Hashem gives us back. Firstly, by giving tzedakah, it's brought down every bit that we give. When we go to the next world at 120, that's what comes with us. the mitzvah of giving tzedakah carries with us. Everything you give away is yours forever. What you keep behind is not yours, and the children, the grandchildren, great-grandchildren will blow it, don't worry. Spend it in your life. Spend everything. Don't go to 120 with nothing left. Give to your children in your lifetime. That's a better thing to do, but give to others. Give and give and give as best we can. Obviously, we're not allowed to give away everything. There is a limit, and that limit is 20%. We're not allowed to give more than that, but except maybe if you're a billionaire or whatever the case. If you won Tesla and you've got $1 billion, maybe it's worthwhile working out exactly what you should give away, because that's the only way you can guarantee you're going to keep that $1 billion, because most people that win lotteries either lose that or lose their families. One or the other, or both, very, very quickly. There's some good comes out of it. I believe there is something on Netflix at the moment. I haven't seen it. Somebody told me about that, an Israeli show in Hebrew about families who learn what to do
When they make money.
when they win the lottery. Yes, and if here we are, if ever a person is, I'll say zoiche to win the lottery, it's good that they win the lottery and they got this blessing. Treat it as a blessing and go and find out what the best way of doing things is from your local Orthodox rabbi, from a financial planner, and make sure that things are set aside. But I would recommend better still, if you do ever take a lottery, don't do it often. Take the smallest ticket you can buy, because the chances of winning, whether you go and spend $150 or I don't know what the smallest ticket costs, $5, if you're going to win the lottery, you're going to win it anyway. And so if you want to take it, yes, don't take it too much and don't take it too often, because that becomes gambling at the end of the day. And the number of people who win, the chance of winning are so slight. And so what's their tats me out of here, or whatever the other catchphrases in the advertising are, it's all about marketing, and it's all about getting to your inner psyche of I'm going to win. We don't win. That wasn't what we were talking about.
Other people win.
Correct, and other people lose, not win.
What happens with giving, you say 10%? What happens if you don't work and there's no such thing as 10%? Can you give what you...
Everybody earns something, okay? So if whatever your earnings are, you give 10% of that.
Of your income?
Yeah, whatever income you have. So if you're earning a pension, we give 10% of pension. If a person is a beggar, it shouldn't happen to anybody ever, but somebody is begging, they're earning money when they're begging. They should, supposed to, if they're a Jewish person, they give 10% of that money. I'll tell you a story that I heard from Rabbi Shapiro in Miami. He said his father, Rabbi Shapiro Zatzal, and his mother were in Yerushalayim. His father sounds like he was an incredibly great rabbi. They were in Yerushalayim one time, and it was Shabbos late afternoon, and they got caught in a shower, massive rainstorm. And they were kind of trying to find somewhere to go. And they land up standing in a very poor neighborhood in Yerushalayim under a little cover. And there was a lady there in her apartment, and she saw them, and she please come into my apartment. She brings him in and she says, look, I'm sorry, I can't offer you any food. I've got 2 little rolls and a little bit of something else for Seder Shishis. I'm sorry, that's all I've got. It's not even enough for me, really. And she had it covered with a piece of plastic because the rain was bucketing down in her apartment. And she was really hospitable to them and really nice. And after Shabbos, they were able to leave and they walked back to where they were staying. And I think it was the next morning, Rabbi Shapiro went back to this lady. He had been given by people in his community money to give for tzedakah in Eretz Israel. And here's this woman living in the poorest conditions imaginable. And he thought, what a great opportunity. She was so kind to us. I'm going to go and give her some of this money that I was given to distribute. And he goes to her and he says, thank you so much for looking after us last night. It was the most beautiful mitzvah. I have some money to give to people, and I'd like you to please accept some money that you can use. Maybe you can fix up your apartment or buy a decent meal, whatever it might be. And he says, no ways, I've never taken any charity in my life. I'm not a charity case. And he's trying to get her to take some money, and she says, you know what, I will take the money. And he says, it makes me feel so good, and the people in my community will hear about you, what you did. But can you just tell me, why did you change your mind? So she says, every morning I get up to go and daven nates at the kotel. Davens nates with the sunrise, 5:30 in the morning, I go and daven. And I see these poor people standing there collecting money, and I've never got money to give to them. Now I can give them something. This woman had everything. She had nothing as far as we could see, but she had everything. And so, yes, should we give? We give what we can, obviously. But we should try and give as much as we possibly can. And so we just need to remember that we've got free will to do what we can, to do anything we like. Free will is about, I've got a choice. Free will doesn't mean, do I have a choice to eat in this restaurant or that restaurant? Or do I have a choice to go for, in my terms, a cycle or a jog? I don't jog generally, but I might have been convinced into taking it up. I don't know why. But we'll agree to disagree. But I have free choice in everything in life to choose between going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. Everything that's in front of us. Which am I going to choose? The right way or the wrong way? Sometimes we will choose the wrong way, but if we realize, we can always go back to the right way. We have free will, just like they had there. They saw miracles. We don't necessarily see miracles, but if we open our eyes, we see them in stories and things that happen. Just connecting with other people and just connecting with Hashem and waking up. And before we started, we spoke about my trip to Sydney. Sydney is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I yesterday were on a ferry in Sydney, and I just sat back and I said, thank you, Hashem, for allowing me to see this beauty that you've put in the world. And it gave me a different appreciation of Sydney. I personally could not live in Sydney. From a Yiddishkeit perspective, it's it's much harder than anywhere else. But to go there and appreciate what the beauty of a place, it was incredible. And so we get given things all the time. When things are put in front of us, we just need to see Hashem's hand in it, that it should direct us to choose the right thing. Unlike some of the people in the desert, every now and again chose the wrong thing, and they complained. So instead, when we've got a challenge in front of us, instead of complaining about it, we need to step back and say, Hashem, why are you testing me here? What can I do better? And maybe next time I will do better, and then Hashem will give me exactly what I need. Everyone should have a wonderful week.